Good evening and welcome to our event tonight with Senator John Fetterman. My name is Charlie Whelan. I am the faculty director at the Center for Business, Government, and Society at Tuck. Before that, I spent many years teaching up campus at Rockefeller, and I still teach classes on public policy in both places. So I will be joining our student moderators tonight. It's my privilege to welcome everybody here, beginning with Senator Fetterman. John Fetterman has dedicated his life to fighting for Pennsylvania's forgotten communities. A Pennsylvania native, John grew up in York and attended Albright College, where he played college football. And he's not standing up, but you will find that totally believable when he does. In 2005, while John was teaching GED classes, he was encouraged by his students to run for mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania. In his 13 years as mayor, John worked to rebuild his community, creating jobs, stopping gun violence, getting youth engaged, and bringing creative urban policy solutions to the town. In 2018, John was elected as Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor and transformed the position into a bully pulpit for a range of issues, ranging from marijuana legalization, economic justice, and equal protection for the LGBTQ plus community, and criminal justice reform. He was elected the junior senator from Pennsylvania in November of 22 and was sworn in on January 23rd, 2023. He sits on the Senate committees on agriculture, nutrition, and forestry, banking, housing, and urban affairs, environment and public works, and the Special Committee on Aging, and the Joint Economic Committee. Our student moderators are Alex Azar in the center there. He's a senior at Dartmouth College, where he studies Russian religion and government. He's from Bethesda, Maryland. On campus, Alex is the president of the Dartmouth Conservatives, a club for right-of-center students that he co-founded in 2023. He's affiliated with the Dartmouth Political Union and is a member of Phi Beta Kappa. He's worked on Capitol Hill for Majority Leader Steve Scalise as a staff assistant, and more recently conducted Eastern European foreign policy research at the American Enterprise Institute. Bea Reichman is a sophomore at Dartmouth College, majoring in Middle Eastern Studies and Government. She currently serves as the secretary for the Dartmouth College Democrats, outreach director for the Dartmouth Student Civics Association, and teaches Hebrew at the Roth Center for Jewish Life at Dartmouth. So the three of us are going to be in conversation with the senator. Thank you all for coming, and special thanks to Senator Fetterman for making time to be here. So we're going to proceed in kind of three basic buckets here, and we're going to start with domestic politics in Pennsylvania, and then we'll move to international, and then we'll kind of bring it back to campus and free speech kinds of issues. So I'm going to kind of broadly alternate between our student guests here. So I'll start with Alex, because you're on my immediate left. Please open it up.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you, Senator, for being here. It's such an honor. My first question is about Pennsylvania and mail-in ballots. So in 2020, it took Pennsylvania 4 days to call the race because of a state law prohibiting the counting of mail-in ballots before Election Day. During this time, most of the mail-in ballots returned Democrat, prompting conspiracy theories of fraud. Your top election official and friend, Republican Al Schmidt, has called this counting time a real vulnerability, and a repeat of 2020 might be in store with 59% of the almost 2 million ballots requested in your home state being for registered Democrats. Senator, if even France can figure out how to have an election in one day and have the results by 9 p.m., why can't Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Vote by mail, that was a grand bargain in Pennsylvania in 2019. And now the Republicans agreed to that, and the Democrats, we agreed to eliminate straight line voter, where you used to be able to, I think there's only one other state that you can walk in and push one button and you go right down the party, boom, 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 boom. And they thought that was going to be helping them, you know, because they assume that most Democrats, say in Philadelphia, just goes, and then we're in and out. So that was a grand bargain that everybody was really excited. And then the pandemic and the Trump election all hit. It's such an overtired kind of a phrase, but it really was the true perfect storm. And they introduced that. That was the first time. And even the Democrats said, we should not be using mail now. It's like, you know, we should wait till the next term because it's going to be huge. And the Republicans refused, saying, no, 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 we got to do it right now, because they understood that it was probably going to be some chaos. And there was a part of that law that refuses people to touch those ballots until 7 a.m. of Election Day. And the Democrats said, please, can we have 3 days, 5 days, whatever? And they're like, no, no, no. And that also all but guarantees a gigantic backlog. And as you referenced, that was fertile, and Trump weaponized that and said, it's Philadelphia, it's bad happening things there. You know, obviously they're stuffing the boxes and everything. And you referenced Al Schmidt, and he was the GOP commissioner, and he was overheading this, and he pushed back and said 100% no. That was true, and that vote was not manipulated. It was absolutely honest. And he could have been the biggest history for hero of all times if he said, yes, it's dirty, something going on, but he stood strong. And as a result of that, he had to get 24/7 security, and his whole family had to be protected by the police because he had so many death threats. So now, will this happen in 24? Unlikely, because we don't have the pandemic. It's a well-known kinds of other issues. And now Al Schmidt now is in charge of that now in Pennsylvania. So he understands more than anybody that we cannot allow Philadelphia to take 3 or 4 days, so they can turn that into all kinds of things. So I think, and also another thing, Trump is not in the White House now. He's actually a private citizen. So it'll be a little different too. So they might say, oh, that something's bad going wrong, but it will hit differently, and I do not believe that they will have that kind of a lag like we had in 2020.
So thank you again for coming and speaking with us. My question is a little bit more about like mental health and gun control. In response to hundreds of mass shootings across the nation in the last year, the Republican Party often points to the growing American mental health crisis as a reason to dismiss Democrats' calls for increased gun control. And you've been an incredible advocate for increased mental health support. You've been very open about your struggle with depression. And so as you work for mental health reforms in the Senate, I want to know if you believe that Republicans are genuine and sincere in their pursuit for mental health legislation, or if it's an excuse to prevent Democratic calls for gun control.
Well, there's some things that definitely aren't helpful if you are suffering from depression. Social media is one. You know, if anyone here, you spend an hour on social media and you're like, oh, I feel better about myself or the world, I'd like to talk to you because I don't. And that's another bad mix, and that's, guns and those kind of thing. And you can get into a very dark place on that, especially with self-harm on that. And I don't know why we can't have an honest conversation about those things. And it's not really about politics. It's undeniable that thousands and thousands of Americans make the terrible mistake of taking their lives because they have the ability to just pick up a gun. And now all the kinds of research that people have survived serious attempts to kill themselves, like jumping off a bridge, 100%, not one single person, they realized, oh my God, what have I done? I've made a terrible mistake. And it's like, it's curative. Like they like, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live. And that is something you can't come back from that. And I just would beg everybody, we got to, that's an important conversation, mental health and gun safety. I'm very much a Second Amendment kind of guy, but I also think it shouldn't be controversial that if you are an enthusiastic about guns, wouldn't you want that to be in the hands of people that can harm themselves or someone that we know or love? I don't know why that's controversial, honestly, but our nation is starting to agree that we have a significant issue, whether it's red or blue, urban, rural, or suburban. If it's not even you, it's someone that you know, someone that you love, somebody that you work with that is suffering from these kind of issues. And it's honest to have that conversation. And it's also honest that it may not have been a political winner, but I got help and I got better. And I have a responsibility and a duty to have that conversation and going to continue to have that conversation. And I never thought that voice would land, but it has. And people regularly reach out and they thank me or credit that, or I talk to people. I have active conversations with 2 members of Congress that have attempted to take their lives or are having these kinds of tough conversations. People realize that the the paradox of depression or that kinds of thing. It tricks you into thinking that you've lost even though that you've won. And it actually got worse after I won. So that's going to be part of the rest of my life, having that conversation and just letting everybody you got to stay in the game. Don't ever believe that lie. Whatever your path, recovery, whatever tools that you respond to, if you promise yourself to stay in that game, you are already on the path to get better.
I've got some audience questions as well that I'm going to sprinkle in. One is, tell us about the impact of both political parties fighting for working class votes in Pennsylvania, and in particular, what messages are landing, and maybe any lessons that could be learned for the broader Democratic Party.
Well, no, I think there's a lot of different things. And let's talk about the unions. I mean, there's some unions that are very firmly Democratic, like SEIU and a lot of the government workers kinds of unions. But if you look at more things like the steel workers or UAW or some of the Teamsters, now you've noticed in this race that there's some unions that aren't going to endorse, or they might even speak at the Republican conversation. And I've noticed, and I've acknowledged that, even back in 2016, that I was at an event. I live across the street from a steel mill, that iconic steel mill that's already at the center of the U.S. Steel sale. And I asked their president, I'm like, hey, where's your guys are at? And they're like, oh, it's probably 50 or 60% of Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's not great. And then a guy just drove by, and he had a truck, and he had, ever know what truck nuts are?
Do I look like a guy who knows what truck nuts are?
No. It literally, it's nuts, you know, they hang on the back of their truck. And he had a bumper sticker saying that, oh, finally, a guy with real balls. Not to be vulgar, but that's what it said. And it's like that demonstrates that has bled into what would have been traditional kinds of democratically voters. And what I say to those folks, it's like, look, vote your job, hobby for your lobby. And let's pick 10 political issues. I hope I agree with in 10 for 10. But one we definitely agree on, that you have the right to organize and to be a union and to have a good wage and a comfortable way to live for you and your family. That's fair, and that's fundamentally American. And the other things, I think, you know, if you put that forward front, you should vote for us, because we are not the party that is committed to destroying the union. And they're talking about states that are, trying to destroy that. But my point, it's undeniable, and we have to assume that it's no longer part to be assumed that, well, that the union, that's democratic. It's definitely, there has been an undeniable shift. Now, will that continue? Unknown. But that goes along with a lot of the special kind of devotion and connection that folks have with Trump. That might be very unique to him, but it has been undeniable in the last 3 cycles.
And if I can just follow up here with another audience question. Opposing Nippon's acquisition of U.S. Steel will lead to the eventual shuttering of Mon Valley Works. How do you reconcile this possibility with union and Biden-Harris administration demands?
Sure. If anyone's I literally live directly across the street from that, literally, including the union hall. And I just got a text from someone on my team, and they're like, hey, they're just selling U.S. Steel. And I'm like, what the blank are you talking about? And they never even gave me a heads up, not even at 5 in the morning, hey. And it was very clear that they were going to kill that entire facility. And that you're talking, potentially thousands of direct and indirect jobs. And I got up on my roof, and I filmed it. I'm like, hey, and whatever I can do to jam this up, 100% I'm going to do that. And that was my commitment. And that's what we did. We went out to the White House, and we were able to kind of jam that up. And that forced Nippon to, now it's like they seem to have found billions of extra dollars in the couch. It's like, oh, by the way, hey, we have to make these kinds of appropriate investments to make sure to keep that facilities open. And I promised the men and women of the steelworkers, it's like before even when I was elected, I am going to follow, your wish, and my vote is going to follow your wish, because you just want your way of life to endure, and I want that, and that's here where you're at. Now, however it works out, the best outcome is going to be what that unit in my mind is, and that protects and makes it safe for the next generation, that we're going to continue to make steel in the Mon Valley, because not we all can just find out and get the next job in AI, or it's like tell a bunch of steel workers, hey, learn how to code.
Big?
I think we could switch over to international relations. I think I want to hear your thoughts on kind of dissent in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is very ideologically diverse, I think, on the issue of Israel and Palestine. Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has spoken out against Netanyahu, and you're very staunchly supportive of Israel and the Netanyahu government. Do you think that this kind of dissent and discourse on Israel and the Democratic Party is healthy, or do you foresee this affecting the U.S.'s leverage and ability to make decisions in the Middle East as the war continues?
Well, a lot to unpack on that. Well, just before this event, my good friend, Peter Welch, if anyone hears that, that's Vermont's senator. And I refer to him as the nicest dude in D.C., and that's true. And he and I have very different views in that, but we're just like, hey, big dude, and we give hugs and we get along. And he just said, hey, I live close, can I stop by and say hello? And so I think it demonstrates that people can disagree as Democrats in the same caucus, and we can still be buds, and we can just understand that, hey, I respect his views, and I've never spent down and sat him down saying, hey, by the way, and he never did the same. So it's like there are different views, and my views sometimes might be an outlier in some ways, and it wasn't. For me, it was never, it's like I never had an opinion or a statement on Netanyahu one way or the other. But it's like, for me, that's the democratic leader of that nation, and that's our ally. And maybe even if somebody, if...
You're a liar. There are no universities left in Gaza. Get out of here. There are children dying.
Children dying!
Their blood is on your hands. Think of your children.
Yeah, they're in Gaza right now, hostage.
If you could continue.
Oh,
please.
yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. And look, and it's like, what I wish I could talk to them, and I would say, you may not believe this or even care, but I am very pro-Palestinian, no different than you in some sense. And I grieve, and the tragedy and the death and the misery. I have 3 kids, and I don't assign value to my children's life more to those. I think what's really different is that they often will blame and hold it's Israel. And to me, I actually, I think the responsibility deserves with Hamas and ultimately Iran and Russia that have created these kinds of proxies in the Middle East that are committed to destroying Israel throughout all of that. So from my sense, that it's an all undeniable truth through all of that is that the second Hamas surrenders and send all of the hostages back home, and imagine being held like that for over a year now, and then this all can be over, and that misery can be. And there's also another truth embedded in that Hamas shouldn't be allowed to survive because Gaza has to be rebuilt, and if Hamas is still functioning, the billions that's required to rebuild Gaza is going to be funneled right through Hamas, and that's allowed them to purchase all of the weapons and those tunnels and create that kinds of massacre in October the 7th. So that's here we are. And as long as there's an ability to establish we're done, then I'm just going to be with Israel throughout this, and they are choosing to eliminate some of the leadership, and I do support that, because there's not going to be any meaningful enduring peace, and even if for folks that want a two-state solution, as long as these kind of organizations that are absolutely committed to destroying Israel, until that's addressed, I don't think you're going to ever have any kind of peace.
Alex, you follow?
If I can just follow up on that, are you disillusioned at all by your Democratic colleagues' tepid support for Israel in this time?
No, I would say sometimes perhaps maybe disappointed, but I've never, I never like sat down, or I never showed up at their house and say, or anything. But I will say that, Peter and I are really kind of at the opposite of the spectrum. But like I said, that's my bud, and we'd probably be having a beer after this. But he's had some stuff with his family that he can't do. So I'd like people to understand that I am not offended or outraged by those views, like the individuals that were protesting. What I'm hoping is that both sides can have very passionate or have distinct views, but that doesn't mean that we can't all find out a way to move through this. And ultimately, more than anything else, I just would love to see that end if the hostages are brought back home. And imagine if you have a loved one that have no idea if they're alive or they're dead, or what they're being tortured or raped or all those things. But it's truly heartbreaking.
So I have a follow-up on that. Is there any reason that the United States couldn't offer the unyielding support you've described, and also either pressure Israel or participate with Israel to provide some view of what a post-conflict Middle East might look like?
I honestly don't know what, but what I really like to say is that I think there's a better chance of enduring peace by some of the decisions that they had to eliminate Hamas and Hezbollah leadership. And remember, all of the experts all described Hezbollah as like the ultimate badass in the Middle East, and it was quickly now they're a bunch of Keystone cops, and now it also revealed that Iran is they're not really so powerful, and now they're essentially kind of like, please don't blow up my oil or my nuclear program. So, but Israel has demonstrated their resolve. And the other side, it would be appropriate for them to stand down and surrender and acknowledge that, hey, clearly we've lost. But that's not happening with Gaza. Why? No, that was very different than what happened with Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, or even with the South with the Confederacy. They actually had to surrender because the misery and the death became too much for the civilians. But they don't have the kind of connection with Hamas and the Palestinians. And I have never described the Palestinians, or Israel's never described Palestinians, but Hamas has. They refer to them as they are necessary sacrifice. In fact, they celebrated in some way all of the death and the misery. And they see that as part of the plan. That's how they design that. And they don't care how many die. They don't know the kinds of misery. And that's why they haven't surrendered, because even though there's not much left of them to even surrender at this point.
John Fetterman, you have blood on your hands. Shame on you. Fetterman, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Fetterman, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Fetterman, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide.
I'm actually not hiding. I'm right here.
No for war and occupation. Money for health and education. No for war and occupation. Money for health and education. Not for war and occupation. No two sides to a genocide. There's no two sides to a genocide. No two sides to a genocide. No two sides to a genocide. There are no two sides to a genocide. Shame on you with this free speech. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.
B, I think you're up.
I think that does bring up some.
And I want to be clear also. And I have to, I know how usually they're kind of staggered. So if there's two more that are waiting for another 15 minutes, I mean, let's just introduce and we can say hello, but I don't take it personal. You can even show up at my house, and that's happened. It's like, hey, it's whatever. And I don't take it personal, it's like we can disagree on that view. But I promise you're not going to turn any minds if you stand up and start screaming or saying all kinds of things. I'm here to have that conversation. And it's ironic to say, you can't hide. I'm like, I'm here in lights and I have a microphone. I'm not hiding. I'm here saying, let's have a conversation here. And
So if we can have some questions about free speech on campus, or we can go back to politics. We were going to get there eventually anyway, so it's up to you.
yeah, and also, if there's another couple that I know that usually works, let's say hello and let's get it over with, and then we can have a nice conversation.
Well, actually, it's nice that they're spaced out. It gives a little breathing room.
Okay. No, I know that's how I've
I think it does bring up a good point about free speech on campus. And I know you met with our President Bylock earlier today. And last year at Dartmouth, we outlined a new initiative for Brave Spaces, where students on campus could engage in respectful dissent and discussion across differences. Do you think that the Democratic Party and the Senate as a whole is a brave space?
Yeah, no, it's like I had the opportunity to meet with the president, and one of the things that she said that really stuck with me, and it's like, we are committed, we all realize that we are training the next generation of leaders, and that's undeniable. This is a much better school than I could have never got in when I was that age, and I had a mullet, and I was listening to Def Leppard, and I was thinking,
What happened to the mullet?
I would have never gotten in. This is the only way I got here. But my point, though, it's like what's important now is, like she said, now we have to train people that it's important to be able to have a conversation with people that you disagree with, and it might have different kinds of sides. That's so valuable. And even it's like a 50 true and 50 a joke. It's like, you should do this in D.C. Like politics. Sometimes it's like, I call that professional wrestling. Like, sometimes you got to grab the chair and, and it's like, sometimes you got to go off the top rope, but you can go back and you're like, hey, we're still friends. It's like, whatever. I understand sometimes there has to be some cheap heat, but it can't get personal, and you can't get vicious and really trying to destroy or even unleash members of your family, or have that spill in where now they start targeting, vulnerable kinds of communities that really they don't have the kinds of protection in their voice in order to really respond appropriately through that, and that's training, the next leadership, the generation of leadership. It's so valuable, and in some sense that's missing in a lot of that. And now social media has made that even much more easy to do that. I would remind everybody, I never really got why there's people that sit around and are like, hey, I can't wait to, Remember that's usually connected to a human being. And it's, are you made happier? Is your life better? What do you get out of that? Just blasting someone online. And I made the mistake after the election, and I did like a post-mortem, and I'm looking through that, and I was actually taken aback of just so much of the hate and that. And it's like, why? I mean, someone that I never did anything or anything to you. So having that skill is so critical, and social media has made it so much cheap and easy to be even more cruel than we ever would do if we're in the same room right now and we're having a conversation. And I would just ask anybody, just respond, think before before it's like, hey, would you want to receive something like this? Really, is it really necessary? What am I really getting out of this?
Just to keep things topical, Senator, this past May, 89 pro-Palestinian students, faculty, and community members were arrested on Dartmouth's green after attempting to set up an encampment. In the past, you've characterized such demonstrations as working against peace in the Middle East and, quote, containing a germ of anti-Semitism. What is your message to these Dartmouth students and community members?
I do. If you're taking over buildings and you are espousing kinds of phrases like, free to the river, to the sea, it's like, let's call it what it is. And I've met with a lot of different members of the Jewish community. I spent October 7th with over 300 Jewish students at Penn. You're in your cohort here in the Ivy League, and they've been really traumatized. And it's like even what happened, in real world in the Middle East, whether they have family members that are in IDF or maybe they were even be, in hostage. You don't really need to have that while you're just getting your education as well too. I'm a full-on free speech. I don't believe, standing up in the middle of an event and yelling and screaming. I don't think that's free speech. But I'm not offended by that. I'm like, okay. But two things are true at the same time. You should not be allowed to break those kinds of rules of engagement. Free speech does not give you the right to terrorize people or to say things that are openly calling for violence or creating a level of discomfort and even fear in a community that's already been traumatized after what's happened on that. So I think two things need to be true at the same time and protected on campus like this. And I salute what your president here has done that. And I think it's not an accident that she's one of the members of the Ivy League cohort that isn't looking for a new job. She's done a great job on that, and I admire the way she's handled that. And I think that has impressed the kinds of an appropriate way, and that's why I see that here on the campus. And again, it makes me feel helpful that that's an important conversation that has to continue.
Any more follow-ups on this, or should we? There's an election coming up, and we were wondering.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's right.
If from your unique vantage point in Pennsylvania, you could talk about the Senate races there, the presidential race in Pennsylvania, kind of how
Sure.
you see
Senate race. Okay. If anyone's following the Senate, there's a state, Montana. You probably might think that it's very red. Well, it is. It's very, very red. That is very pro-Trump, and he's probably going to carry it by 18 to maybe as high as 20 points. Now, John Tester, he is fighting for his fourth term, and he's a Democrat. He is the last Democrat standing on the high plains in the Rockies. So it seems bleak that even though he's the ultimate real guy, he's beloved on both sides. You can't fake that kinds of authenticity that he has. He's missing 3 out of his fingers. It was lost in a meat grinder accident, and he's a true dirt farmer. And you can still be that real and so authentic. You can be the strongest guy in the world, but he has to bench press 1,000 pounds to cover that kind of a gap. That's really tough. But he's doing that heroically. And the Republicans all agree that this is the easiest way that they can capture the majority. And that's why there's over $200 million on the ground in Montana. $250 million. Now remember, that's 600,000 voters. $250 million with 600,000 votes? That's like saying, hey, I have $100,000 in cash. You got to spend all of it in McDonald's. You can't do that. And at that point, what must it be like on the ground? 2 people yelling back and forth. You're this, you're this, you're this, you're this. Like I'm a senator. I've tuned that shit out already. On that. And I think at this point, no one listens at this point. If you're in a battleground, who's going to answer to random numbers? Of course, because it's a poll or it's this or whatever. So it would be a miracle if Tester prevails. And if he does, then that's probably a good signal that we are actually going to maintain the majority. Now, some of the other rates continue to get close. In my own state, Bob Casey, mild thing. He's running against the guy from Connecticut. Nothing wrong with living in Connecticut. Probably not a great idea if you're running for the Senate in Pennsylvania. They originally, they tested that thesis. Dr. Oz thought, it's like, hey, I can live in New Jersey and run, but he has a lot more free time in his schedule. But there's the other close race is Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Great guy. Ohio is very red. You may not know, but J.D. Vance came from Ohio. He ran a really sad campaign, and he was in my cycle in 22. Brown, I do think, will win because, yes, it's red, but he can handle that because they have a terrible candidate. He's a hard worker, and he has a very unique kind of connection with the voters in Ohio. So I do believe he can prevail on that. So it seems that the majority, I mean, it's going to be able to hold the majority. If we do, it's like, oh my God. But we talked about this with folks at lunch. Something that I don't really see that in the media. It could go a couple different ways. Harris could win, but she doesn't have the Senate. Maybe she has the House, maybe she doesn't. But even if they have the House, they can jam up the Senate. It's going to be impossible to pass anything sweeping, or really, certainly she can't without significant kinds of changes. And when Obama was elected, McConnell's was like, hey, I'm about making sure he's going to be a one-term president. That's a dynamic. Another thing, though, that would really, if you are very much on the Democratic side, that there is a 777 kind of situation. I use that, the slot machine metaphor. You hit 777, jackpot, ding, 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 ding. Trump wins, probably has the House, has the Senate, the filibuster drops, and you know what the bonus jackpot is? The Supreme Court. And that's been very clear, a 6-3 majority, and they have seemed to be ruling very much on his side. So they would allow to create all kinds of legislation, and all kinds of legislation and laws ends up in the Supreme Court. So they will cover a lot of the legislation that they could enact. And that is the way that they could fundamentally change American society for that. At that point, if that happens, the only thing standing in the way of that is the filibuster. And if the filibuster drops, I can't imagine anyone could withstand, and that would be his first wish. It's like, hey, that's got to go. All of the things that he was, he's actually claimed. Revenge, I am your retribution, the kinds of thing. That's the one thing, that's the only break that would stop that. And that's what anybody, if you're really concerned. That, to me, that's doomsday kinds of that 777 on the slot machine where they get their jackpot.
You have a follow-up, Alex?
Yes, I do. So, Senator, in 2021, you said that Democrats should stop wasting time and get rid of the filibuster. Do you still hold that view, and would you vote to end the filibuster?
Oh, yeah, no. I said thing. I'm like, well, 100%. They're going to drop it. Like 100%. If they ever get in that they're going to do it. I'm saying the same thing. Yeah, I am the same, the absolute same thing. But now with the Supreme Court, and I'm not in favor of changing the Supreme Court except for only one thing. There should be, like an age limit, 70 or 75. It shouldn't be life. That's crazy because. But I'm not saying let's expand. If we had it 6-3, oh, I'd love it. I'd love it. No, we're not, everything's perfect. Don't change that. It's undeniable. They packed the court, and they have that probably for the next 30 years. But here's where we are, and as long as we don't have that, alignment, but I would be shocked that the filibuster survives if Trump wins and he has the House and of course the Senate. That would be the first thing that I've seen that he's decided that was a shock.
B?
Yeah, so you talk about like the 777 on the slot machine and having it like it's a real possibility that Republicans could take all three branches. There's 13 days left until the election. What do you think the Democrats and the Harris campaign specifically should be doing differently to try to prevent that?
I have a running joke. It's like I don't give advice except on fashion. but it's I've chosen to spend the last number of weeks. I'm going around in a lot of small red counties and rallying and just making the argument to any reachable kinds of voters that are left, and it all matters. If you move 500 votes in a small red county, well, that may not matter. It might, like it did in Florida in 2000. But anything happens in one small red county in Pennsylvania, multiply that by 57. They move in unison. If something happens in Elk, it's not going to be much different than you have in Potter or other kinds of counties. So that's for Democrats, for me the magic is in the margins. That's how we win. But that's also how we jam it up, and that stops the Republican from winning statewide on that. So, and that's what's important. I think, quite honestly, I think Harris is going to pull every vote that they possibly can out of Philadelphia, and out of Philadelphia, we have to show up in places like Erie. Erie, if anyone's familiar with Erie, that's the ultimate bellwether county, if not, well, and maybe not in the nation. And I was telling the media, it's like, if I only would know one thing before the election, tell me who wins Erie County, that's our next president. Whoever wins Erie wins Pennsylvania, that's the president. And that's what happened in 2016. Trump carried Erie, Biden did, and that same thing, I would be shocked if that's the same thing happened in 24. And just, it hasn't even been 10 days, I lead an event with Harris in Erie. It was incredible. Great energy, but it's undeniable there's a lot of energy for Trump as well, too. He was passing out French fries, in Pennsylvania. I mean, everybody understands. He may be vulgar or bizarre at times, but he's not dumb, and everybody understands that you gotta win Pennsylvania.
There's an audience question that's relevant here, which is, in this polarized political environment, in the presidential race, but in general, is it more important to persuade the unpersuadeds, the undecideds, or to just focus on the base and get the voters out? And are those things in opposition to one another?
Yes. That's the thing. Like, I just want people to understand, if somebody has a quarter, do that. Hey, you're all an expert. Hey, you're an expert, you're an expert, you're an expert. 50% of people that say, oh yeah, Trump's got that, half of you are going to be like, we're genius. And same thing. And it's like, I'm so tired of the stupid hot takes. It's just going to be a coin toss. It is. And I promise you, I'm a practitioner. We cannot be so precise in our business that we could just do the perfect kinds of ad or kinds of social media to win by just 10,000 votes. No, it's very, very imprecise. But that's what I'm saying. It's just like statistically, it's an error on one side. Some days it goes for you, sometimes it moves against you. And that's the place that we're at right now.
If I can follow up on that and keep us in Pennsylvania, do you see a fundamental realignment taking place in Pennsylvania and the rest of the Rust Belt, where white working class voters, Reagan Democrats, might be finding more in common with Trumpian populism than perceived Democratic elitism?
Well, no. I can't speak to somebody that's come under his charm, but I can. Maybe I have I describe that to people as he is like a black hole. For decades, physicians say, well, there's no way something like a black hole exists. It just can't. It's impossible. And then they discovered, yeah, it does. And like, how? They're not sure how, where they come from. But now you can just acknowledge that it's real, it's here, and you have to respond accordingly. And it absorbs everything. In some way, it gets larger and stronger. Impeachment, trial, and it all culminated with the assassination. Like literally shot and survived. And thank God he did, honestly. Like, I can't even imagine the chaos our nation would have been plunged in that. But my point, like, that is, we are living in the ultimate October surprise. People used to talk about the October surprise. We're living in that. So the alignment, what makes him so popular, I don't know. And necessarily, maybe people they love the fact that he can say and do whatever he wants. And he's like, I don't give an F. He can stand up on a stage and say, oh, I could be sunbathing, and you would see the most beautiful body you'd ever seen, and much better than Sleepy Joe. Like, if I started talking about that, you'd assume that I was having another stroke. But he has. If you haven't seen the movie Bulworth, that's the ultimate kind of political satire, and that is a senator who kind of had a breakdown and start saying a lot of honest things and very blunt things, and now it's referred to as I going full Bulworth. We are so far past that right now. Things now, I'm old enough to remember in 2000, Al Gore just was like, rolled his eyes at George Bush, and that was like, scandal, scandal, scandal. Now I don't want to have a beer with that guy. And now, like, he's saying they're eating the dogs. They're eating the geese. And I'm begging you, if you are a Democrat, don't waste any more time saying, why are people voting for this? Why? No one exactly knows, but I promise you it's happening. It's happening, and acknowledge that. Don't be, just be engaged in any way that you can involved in some small way. It all matters because it's going to be very close, and we will be unknown what would be the one thing. But I'm sure, though, the thing that won't change thing is the next burn on Twitter or the next, can you believe what he said? What's left? What's left at this point? So at this point, the world's going to change in 10 days. And my hope is that there's peaceful kinds of, and I do believe that if Harris, God forbid, loses, I don't think it's going to be the situation where they're going to try to storm the Capitol or things. And who knows what the other side does. I sure hope they can just say, but we can't be in a situation where I love the election and I know there was no cheating if I win. But if I lose, that doesn't mean that has to be cheating either. So that's what really is destroying democracy. More than what really is money. Money is a cancer in politics. It is terrible, terrible. There's $540 million in Pennsylvania in the presidential. Just Harris and Trump. Over $500 million. Telling you're terrible, think of what we could do with that money. My race was the most expensive Senate race in history, $330 million to just tear me apart. And the other side, it's not helpful. It's pointless. We are so far away with democracy. If the most anyone could give is, say, $100 or $200, your voice matters. And now you have Musk. He dropped $75 million. Easier for him than it would be buying somebody a cup of coffee. Then Gates just dumped $50 million in Harris. It's like, that's not speech. That's a perversion of our democracy. And that was a Supreme Court in Citizens United, and that is so destructive. And I despise it. But that's a game that anyone in that has to play, and it's gross.
Pete?
I mean, that money is in politics. You just talked about $250 million in Pennsylvania. Harris campaign has millions and millions of dollars to spend. where should they be putting it, if not in advertising, yelling at the other side? Like, it's there right now. Where should it go?
It's just, I mean, the saturation. Like, I say this, I'm saying it publicly. Like, I've stopped paying attention on all of this and that and all that kind of stuff. It's just hand to hand in the trench. And, you know, when it's all over, we're going to only find out, you know, who was the genius, who was the clown. You know, like, that's what I'm saying. You know, I haven't said anything different since 2016. You know, sending the alarm that Clinton is not going to walk away with this easy. Something's happened here. And I said the same thing in 2020. You know, oh my gosh, this was a nightmare in 20, you know, that first term. So we definitely are going to have, and we're going to get rid of Trump. And he was too close. And now he's back. He's back. How many times did people assume, like, he's done? No. That's the thing. It's that black hole metaphor. It just absorbs thing, and it develops, you know, stronger gravity. And he has remade the entire party. My friend, anyone of the names, Adam Kinzinger. Yeah. You know, he stood up. You know, a real character, and it's tragic that it cost him his career in politics. I mean, he has much bigger things ahead, but there is the one thing that you can get canceled for is disagree or move against him. So here we are, and who knows what's going to happen? Will the MAGA movement survive if Trump loses? Probably not. Because you're only going to have one Pennywise. If anyone else dresses like Pennywise, you know, you just end up at a birthday party, or you work at a carnival. You look like a dope, or you turn into morons like Mark Robinson, or, you know, these kinds of, you know, like, oh my gosh, they're all like the ultimate wet dream kind of candidates. We all would love to run against as Democrats. Only one person can be like Donald Trump, and that's him. Anyone tries to act like that, I mean, thank you. We all want to run for someone like that. Like, that's a miracle.
When you described your job at lunch, it didn't sound like something someone would want to spend $330 million to get. So if you could just...
I know, I agree.
So tell us how much you're enjoying the job.
Yeah, you know, everybody thinks that it's all. If you've ever seen this show, I don't know if it's on reruns or it's on Netflix, or whatever. The West Wing, and it's just like suddenly it's snappy dialogue, and it's like, you know, like turning on a dime. It's like no, there's no glamour. When I got there, I asked, like, hey, is there like a secret society? Is there some kinds of anything, or like, you know, parties, or just sitting around? And they're like, no. I go back to my apartment, you know, and I have a shitty 500 square foot apartment. When I'm done, you know, voting and stuff, I go home and I'm like, oh, what's on Grubhub tonight? And, you know, what kind of shitty show am I going to watch on Netflix, which is kind of redundant in some sense. And then, you know, it's $2,000 a month for a very small apartment, and like all of the glamour. And I'll never understand why men and women are willing to spend tens of millions of dollars for all of this glamour and all those things. I drove to visit with all of you in a Dodge Durango, and you know, it's like there's no mystery to that. I mean, I'm proud and I'm grateful to be a part of Pennsylvania's vote, but I just want you to understand that it's not worth spending $330 million for that. And think of what we could do for our society instead of destroying human beings. That really, I wish that could change.
Have you watched Bad Sisters? Because I think there are better shows on, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, no, it's like, man, this could end my career, but I am a fan of Sister Wives, that show on TLC. My wife and I watched that, And what other bad TV? I'm trying to think. What's
Slow
bad.
Horses is good.
Yeah, I mean, we all have. There's no judgment here. There's no judgment. But yeah, no, I'm telling you, there's a lot of people. And I read an article, Mitt Romney. Incredibly wealthy. He's has a great head of hair, and ran for president. And he has a nice house. He bought his own house, but he has sitting in an expensive leather chair, watching Netflix and eating a salmon sandwich with ketchup. So that's, there's, if there is that glamorous life, I haven't met the member that has that, or they won't share that secret, because I haven't,
All right, we're going to finish up with the last questions here. So Alex and then B.
So, Senator, as you've outlined tonight, this election will have tremendous consequences for our country, but also for other countries, such as Ukraine, which is now embroiled in a land war with Russia.
Profound. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The Biden administration has been consistently hesitant to allow U.S.-supplied arms to be used by Ukraine against Russian targets inside of Russia. Do you support the use?
It's a hard question in that sense. Like, we have the kinds of weapons that would allow Ukraine to reach deep into Russia, and a lot of people might. It's tough, and now Russia, they threaten nuclear response, that kind of thing. A crazy man. He sent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of his own boys into like a gigantic meat grinder. Doesn't mean anything to him. Who knows what he have to lose? And now North Korean soldiers now are showing up there. Who knows what that means? To me, that's not projecting power. That's just pathetic, and how broken Russia has. They emptied the prisons. They're turning mercenaries. Now they're turning to North Korea. They can't even feed their own citizens. But to me, I described it in the lunch, that the thing that I'm concerned is there is a full-on assault globally on democracy. Ukraine, in Israel, definitely in Taiwan, and it's almost certain that China will move and try to take Taiwan. They've actually said that. And I feel like that makes it more important to stand on the side of democracy. These democracies, we're not perfect, but we are the last chance that we have to maintain and to take the world in a more just, prosperous, and secure place, and that's only with democracy.
B.
I think a lot of us are here students because we're young people who are really passionate about government and passionate about politics. And I think learning in these spaces, it's hard not to get cynical about the future of government. So what do you say, what's your message to us about the future of politics and how we should kind of use our voices to make a difference?
My dad always said, it's whatever you grow up, just be a good one. I try to do that as when I was a mayor, as a lieutenant governor, or as a senator. But there's also, if I'm being honest, have you ever heard NFL players, they're asking, would you want your son to play in the NFL? And some now start to say, no, maybe not. With that. So, my son, he's 15. Actually, he's visiting. He's a big fan of your school. He definitely doesn't want this for his life. No, he just wants, and in some sense, I'm actually kind of relieved, because I think that's going to get more and more coarse and cruel and personal until we get a thing around TikTok or around social media, and now AI. That's going to take it to a level that we can't even possibly understand or process that. Things that were unthinkable when I graduated from grad school, literally a quarter century ago. Politics has changed so much. Imagine that. I had a professor, Alan Simpson. He was a Republican senator from Wyoming, and he was pro-choice. How is that possible? You look back and you're like, oh my God. And Mickey Edwards, he was the founder of the Heritage Foundation. can you imagine, how many people would protesting and upset that, like, right, things that were just like celebrated that now. That now some people think we got to root that out, and we can't have like an open dialogue. I like to learn from people. Now, on my, I'm looking on my phone. I guess the battery died, but regardless, I use Apple News, and I read everything. Left, right, middle, whatever. I would just encourage you, don't, just pick your own bubble. Challenge yourself and read things that you don't agree. You might even be offended or whatever, but it's better to put that in front of you and read that, and to continually challenge your own views, because you might actually learn things, because it's impossible that the other side is 100% wrong. It's not true. It's not. There are valid points on both sides. And bipartisanship is difficult sometimes because the base will punish you. They have a thing called a primary. And then it's like, hey, I'm coming for you. And then that's part of it. And now because it's unlimited money, and that's how that happens with that. So my gut reaction is I'm relieved that my son isn't interested in going into politics. Now, that might sound grim or cynical. That's not. But if anyone is interested in that, I salute you. And as long as you go in that eyes open, then I think that's what's necessary, because we do need good ones. We do need committed ones. I don't care what side on, Republican, Independent, I don't care what they are. Just be a good one, because there are a lot of good ones on the other side. I'm friends with many of them. So.
Be a good one. Okay, well, thanks to both of you for being up here and helping to moderate. And thank you, Senator Fetterman, for doing the job that sounds like it's a lot harder than most of what we do. And thank you for your grace in the face of the protests, and for modeling the kind of behavior that is actually going to move us in the right direction.
I would say this to all of them. It's like there are no hard feelings, and I just wish, believe me, we all want this to end, but again, we might have different reasons, or we might have different kinds of villains in that issue. But my point, I enjoy having conversations. And it's so critical to have these kinds of conversations with people that you may not agree and be on a different side. And the fact that now is part of the deal, what you're learning here in Dartmouth, that's a reason why I'm encouraged by it for the future. So,
well,
thank you for coming.
Thanks to all of you.